on to putting the spotlight on Juspay, which is a payment infrastructure company for enterprises and banks that has secured $60 million as part of its Series D funding round. That was led by Kedara Capital with participation from existing investors like SoftBank and Axel. And with that round, Juspay has also achieved a unicorn status. It was founded in 2012 by Vimal Kumar and Sheetal Lalwani. Remember, Juspay offers a range of products including checkout authentication, tokenization, payouts and unified analytics. The company's clientele spans enterprise merchants and leading banks globally. So let's now welcome on board the management of the company. We have now Sheetal Lalwani, the co-founder and COO of Justpay, joining us. Thank you very much, Sheetal, for joining us here on ET Now. First things first, let's talk about the fundraise, because with this fundraise, you've also become 2025's first unicorn. So congratulations on that. Can you walk us through the size of the round and more details on what this really means for Justpay in terms of capital allocation and priorities?
Yeah, it is a 60 million round led by Kedara Capital and also with participation from our existing investors. It's a mix of primary and secondary, but the primary logic behind this is, Justpay is growing, we are growing internationally, and there are various places where we would like to invest for the next decade, right? For example, in AI also. That's the primary rationale behind how we would be doing some of our capital allocation. As you might have also seen in across AI, across also our products, open sourcing has also been a big theme. Open source is not just us. I think it's a massive tsunami wave which is hitting all of us. For example, in AI, one of the largest trends is about how open source is going to democratize and make AI as a utility for a whole lot of nations, not just the ones who are able to invest the billions, right? So that's a little bit of color on how we look at this fundraise and our journey ahead.
Right, Sheetal. So do throw some light on growth metrics of the company, your transaction volumes, your revenue growth, and are you profitable as a company given the kind of competition that we've seen in the payment space? So whether it is front end or back end infrastructure wise.
Sure. The timeline is now. So Justpay is already profitable. In fact, we'll be finishing. In fact, we closed the financial year with a good profit. This is a bit, before the ESOPs cost typically, but otherwise Justpay is already at a full business corporate level. We are profitable. Growth has been good. We've been growing close to 55-60% year on year. We expect a similar growth going forward for the next few years. But, more importantly, like I said, there are places. So currently our growth, our revenue drivers are all primarily India-based, right? Our enterprise business and our bank business. But in the last 3 years, actually, we've laid a solid foundation for our international expansion plans. For example, we've opened up offices already in 4 locations outside of India: Singapore, Dublin, Sao Paulo, and San Mateo in the Bay Area. And we're already seeing very good results, traction in Southeast Asia, for example, right? Because it's a place where it's very close to how India operates. The India brand and the Justpay brand has a good recall, and we are able to grow the business there. But broadly, we see a lot of similarities on what we've solved for here in India in payments, which is about making things seamless, giving the flexibility of choice, interoperability, building great experiences on top of all this diversity and complexity which is happening. It's a global problem. This is what businesses globally are grappling with. And why I'm giving this color is I think the canvas is much larger for us, right? And it's not something because of this round. In fact, the round is just an outcome. The inputs were the investments which we sowed about 3 years back when we started in a very committed fashion, catering, spreading our knowledge, and doing business development outside of India.
All right, Sheetal, you've also expanded the company's footprint across Asia Pacific, Latin America, Europe, UK, and North America, like you're saying. So, what's the growth that you're witnessing in those geographies, given that there are local competitors as well? And what's the edge you think you have there, and the kind of growth projections and the current growth levels that you're clocking?
Super. First, let me just tell you, like Southeast Asia is probably the place where we've actually seen good traction. And see, we are in the enterprise business, right? Which means sales cycles are easily up to year and a half. And especially when you're starting off, right? We believe in this concept of building mind share first, then you do market share, and then the revenue follows. Right. So I would say in Southeast Asia, we're already there a little bit in the market share. The mind share was already built. I would say Europe, US, and to a certain extent, when we say LATAM, it's primarily Brazil that we are focusing right now. We are more in the mind building place, right? So, but your other part of the question is more relevant. What do we think are the opportunities? Why do we think we have a opportunity to win here, right? And it's a little bit first principle based, Smita. India has actually been at the forefront of innovation and tackling problems in payments, right? You can say that a little bit broadly about fintech, but payments, India is clearly ahead, right? As consumers, we all know about what UPI has done, but there's a lot of other things which India has done right. For example, our regulator is very, very pro innovation, I would say, in some ways, like mandating two-factor authentication back almost in 2011, 15 years back, right? A lot of countries are doing that now because two-factor authentication means you systemically eliminate fraud, but you introduce friction, which is okay. There are a lot of ways to do frictionless payments. So my point is, India has this unique combination of very pro innovation, very thinking ahead kind of regulators. We also have a great depth in e-commerce and all sorts of other digital businesses where payments becomes extremely critical. And there's a lot of
Right.
innovation within payments itself, right? So if you put all of these things together, India is like a very fertile ground. You have scale, you have innovation, and then you have very high bar for technology. And finally, India has to do all of this in payments at almost a fraction of the cost, right? We don't have businesses in payments which are built on fat margins like you would see in the West, right? It's sort of zero. So you have to give a lot of value. So when you solve for all of these in India and you can survive and you can actually build a business, a thriving business, right? That's what sets you up for being able to compete in those. We may not do the same kind of GTM. For example, open source was a GTM which we started 3 years ago for the West. So that when there's no Justpay brand, how do they trust something, right? You trust something through transparency. Full open source was the reason for that.
Right, Sheetal, but there have been partner exits as well, especially even as PhonePe, Razorpay, CashPay, and Paytm have discontinued their integrations with Juspay. How do you think that's going to impact the growth momentum that you currently on, and platform adoption, especially like you stated that margins in this segment are rather thin?
No, Sumita, we've spoken about this at length. We've published a couple of blogs also in the sense like, firstly, no partners kind of say their stance is they will support merchants only if they do direct integrations and not use third-party routers. And, for us, because at some point there's some narrative about transparency and hence because we had already done open source for the US and Europe market, we just extended that so that our merchants know that there's no such reason to be worried about us. Open source, there's also an open data. We published metrics where we've shown that there's very little in our orchestration platform which goes to our payment aggregation business. We can follow up and give you reference to our blogs which we've done. In terms of growth, we firmly believe that these large online businesses will require a platform like ours, which is the reason why we've existed for 10, 12 years. Merchants always had the option to go direct even when they wanted, and we never stopped them. All we are doing now is just making it even more easier for them to adopt it as part of their own systems and not like a third-party system. That's what open source does. We have merchants contributing to the open source software now and making it as their own. This is like every tech company is heavily built on open source. right? Mostly we've built on open source databases, operating systems, like internet is built on right? Now is the age of open source applications also. If you see, what we are doing is for payments, but it's going even above. A bunch of AI tools are becoming open source, not just the foundational models which are getting open source and open weight. A lot of tools are also going open source. So open source is going to be at the very core of how businesses build and put up their technology roadmap. And we are just taking that approach even for payments now.
Right, Sheetal. So one final question before we let you go. Just want to understand what the long-term vision for Justpay that you have. Do you see yourself heading towards an IPO in the near term, long term, or are there any M&A opportunities that are of interest to you?
We're very excited about becoming an international company. I would say that's at the top of our priorities, right? Setting up the infrastructure, building the certainty to being a international business for sure. But at the same time, I mean, we are very, cognizant of the fact that we are a funded company, we have stakeholders, and we promise something to them, which we will do. So, being, say, IPO, we don't have any IPO plans, but the maturity to being IPO company is growing within the ecosystem, right? So it's becoming a lot easier for us to do that. So bringing any kind of financial governance, all of that, we are going to be very open. And M&A, we've always been opportunistic about. If it makes sense, we would consider. But so far, I think our focus has been in making sure, the way we've established ourselves in India, can we do the same in some of the larger markets outside? Because why can't we build a world-class payments company out of India, right? So,
All right, so no IPO plans in the near term. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Sheetal, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on what your vision and outlook for the company is going to be and how are you going to play a major role so far as India's payment space is concerned. Thanks very much once again for joining us.